And we are live. Hello, everyone. Happy St. Paddy's Day for all you other Irish folks out there. I'm not Irish, but I am from the island, so I get to, I think, celebrate a little bit. I'm not sure what my heritage is, actually. But if you're here on St. Patrick's Day, or you're here after, that's completely okay, because I'm glad to have you here. And if you're especially a YouTuber, then happy to have you. And hopefully we have some Periscope people come in. But I have some questions for you guys that are going to help improve my videos and going to help improve my process and all those different things. So stick around for the very end and you can help me answer some of these questions, because I don't know the answer, but I have a feeling that you might. But I want to kind of do a little bit of a change of pace today and not talk about Andrew Yang and politics, but I did want to talk about something that was on my mind. It's something that I was having a conversation with a friend earlier about, and it's about social media and why social media, specifically Snapchat and Instagram, because these are the two that really are especially egregious. So they're especially bad, in my opinion. But why social media, and specifically Snapchat and Instagram, are bad for society. And you've probably heard some arguments about this. You've probably heard people talk about this, especially with the whole delete Facebook thing that came up. And Facebook, to me, Facebook isn't as bad as these other two are. And we'll talk about the reasons why. But the reasons why Snapchat and Instagram are bad for society is because of these two aspects about it. One, it's because they're addicting, plus they're bad for our mental health. So it's those two reasons combined, that it's addicting and bad for our mental health. Hello, Clickbaiter. It's your first day on Periscope. Welcome. Anyway, it told me to say hi to you. So the reason why, again, it's bad for society is because of these two reasons combined. If it was just one of them, maybe you could have some argument again, some argument for keeping them, except for if it's bad for your mental health. But we'll talk about why it's bad for our mental health and why it's addicting. But the first thing that I want to go over is why they are so addicting. That's the first thing I want to touch on. So why is Instagram and Snapchat and other forms of social media, why are they so addicting? And the reason is because they play off of uncertain and seemingly random rewards. There's a lot of different things that people say. It's visual, or, social. It's good to have social proof, and it feels good to have people like your stuff. And that's all completely true. But the reason why all of that stuff is addictive is because it's a random reward. So there's a famous experiment with a rat that's in a box. And if they put a rat in a box and they had a switch, and the switch was, in one scenario, the switch, every time you hit it, food would come out. In another scenario, when it hit the switch, no food came out. And in another scenario, when the rat hit the switch, randomly food would come out. But only random. So it wouldn't be on every switch, it wouldn't be on every two. It would be completely random whether food comes out or not. And they had the rat explore the box trying to find food. And eventually, if there's no food, the rat tries completely everything to try and find some food. So when it would go over to the switch and it was the regular delivery, so on every flip of the switch, the food would come out. When that was the case, the rat would go over whenever it was hungry, flip the switch, and food would come out. And then the rat wouldn't touch the switch anymore. When food didn't come out on the flip switch, the rat would just completely ignore the switch. It was only when it was a completely random reward that the rat went over and flipped it and wouldn't stop flipping it. That was kind of the only thing that mattered in the rat brain, was that it would go over and keep flipping the switch because it was never sure when food would come out. And it didn't matter if the rat was hungry or if it had just ate. Because it was a random reward, there was never this certainty that it would be coming out in the future. So in the rat brain, it made the most sense to keep flipping the switch so that it would have food for, the future, because it just didn't know. And that's the same sort of mechanism that operates in our minds. When we don't know that the reward is certain, it becomes a lot more addicting. And it's that thrill, and it builds up some of that anticipation. And this is the same concepts that slot machines are built on. So if you go to a slot machine, the reason why they're so addicting is because you don't win on every pool. And you also don't lose on every pool. If everyone lost to the casino, no one would ever go. The fact is, you have a random chance of being a winner. And even if you do become a winner, because it's so addicting, a lot of people just gamble that right back. So it's that uncertain rewards that are so addicting. So how does that work for Instagram and Snapchat? On one hand, when you post content, you are never quite sure if people are going to like it or not, or if it's going to have the same number of likes as your other posts did. Because especially if you start becoming relatively known on these platforms, if you post something and you're used to getting 500 likes on Instagram and then you only get 200, now that's a major step down. So that's going to make you feel bad, even though you still got 200 likes. But it's that reference point that makes you unhappy. And it's the uncertainty that makes us want to keep posting more and more content, because we don't know when we're going to get that proof, that reinforcement, that positive reinforcement from society. We don't know when that's coming, so it makes people want to post more and more and more. The other thing that is addicting is the content itself on the social media. Because we all know sometimes when you go on Instagram or Snapchat or Reddit or really any social media, you're not entirely sure if it's going to be a good day on Instagram or a boring day on Instagram. So you don't know if the content is going to make you laugh, you don't know if it's going to be good content or if it's going to be bad content. And each individual contributor, each individual poster, each individual content creator is going to have some hits and they're going to have some misses. And it's that uncertainty of the reward when you log on to these platforms, when you actually scroll down your newsfeed, it's the uncertainty that makes it so addicting. Because you don't know if it's going to be good or not. You don't know if it's going to make you laugh. You don't know if you're going to get that dopamine to activate in your brain. Because if it was all good all the time, you wouldn't be on it all the time. You would only be on it when you want something good to happen or when you need to feel better. But if you were content at the moment, you wouldn't even check. But because it's uncertain, it makes us really go on there a lot more, because we don't know if it's going to be good or if it's going to be bad. And that's just a natural biological way to addict someone to something. And so the other thing, so it's addicting, so we can all agree. The other thing that makes it bad for society is that it's bad for our mental health. So it's addicting and it's bad for our mental health. If something is addicting plus bad for our health in any sort of scenario, we can see how that has bad effects on society. So smoking, for instance, smoking is addictive and it's bad for our health. And we see how we've demonized smoking and smokers, and we've chased them out of public spaces, and we've made it so that it's very hard to be a smoker, especially in America. You can't smoke indoors, you don't want to smoke in your house, you don't want to smoke in your car. The smell, people, are really adverse to that smell. So because it's addicting, because it's bad for our health, we've decided as a society that this is not something we want around us. Because back in the past, no one was really bothered by the smell. You don't even notice it if you're a smoker. If you smoke cigarettes, you don't smell the smell at all. So if you're around a bunch of cigarette smokers and you don't feel like smelling that smell anymore, start smoking and you'll stop smelling it. But don't listen to that advice. Brian Ross, start smoking. No, don't do that. Anyway, so why is it bad for our mental health? The reason is because on social media, what makes us happy or unhappy with our circumstances is less about the circumstances themselves and more about our reference point. There's a study done in David and Goliath, a book written by Malcolm Gladwell, big famous author. He does the Freakonomics podcast. And in David and Goliath, he talks about how students, some of the smartest students in the world, who end up going to Princeton and Harvard and Yale, how students who go there end up being less happier than equally smart students at other schools. And what happens is when these students, and they even drop out at higher rates, and we'll talk about this a bit, but say you have a really smart kid who goes to Harvard, say a physicist, or someone who wants to study physics, or some higher level math, something that's pretty hard. So you have a pretty smart kid who ends up going to Harvard or Princeton. Now, when they get to Harvard and Princeton, they end up being relatively average among their peer group. And because they're so used to being number one in their previous school, number one in their area, number one in pretty much everything they've done academically, now that they're being compared to the other best of the best and brightest of the brightest, that ends up having a negative effect on their mental health. And because they aren't graduating at the number one in their class, they actually end up doing much worse than they otherwise would, because they're being compared to other prodigies. It's that reference point that determines our happiness or unhappiness with the current state and situation. Because you compare yourselves to the people that are around you. You don't compare yourself to the global average or to the national average. You compare yourself to the people that are around you. So if you're making $50,000 a year, that's pretty good, and you're going to feel pretty good about yourself if you're hanging out with people who make $30,000 a year. You're going to feel like the rich guy. But if you're hanging out in Silicon Valley, at the Bay, and you're around a bunch of millionaires, suddenly you don't feel so rich, and your internal feeling about your wealth goes down. The book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman talks about this concept, and our reference point determines how we feel about things. So with social media, when we go on Instagram and when we go on Snapchat, we are comparing ourselves to other people's highlight reel. So when people post their content, they're not posting their failures, they're only posting their successes and the most interesting things that happen in their day. So we're comparing our entire life, the ups and downs, the goods and the bads, with someone's curated, customly designed content that's meant to be only highlights. It's meant to only be good things. And so what that means is we're referencing ourselves. Our reference point is now everyone else's happiness. So we see everyone else being happy. We see everyone else doing really interesting things. And we know that we're not doing all those interesting things. And what happens is, because this is our peer group that we're following, because this is what we're exposing ourselves to a lot, we end up becoming much less happy and a lot more unhappier. And it kind of feeds into this really destructive cycle where to feel happy, you want that dopamine to release, right? So you start posting more and more content. And it's this science of addiction that the social media companies have down pat. And it's pretty smart how they have it configured. So you keep trying to post more content, you're posting more and more of your highlight reel, and a lot of it's fake. You have a picture with a whole group of people and they're all smiling. And these aren't people that you even know. In college, it's notorious for this. You'll take a picture with a group of people you don't even know and post it, and it looks like you're all great friends, but some of you probably know what I'm talking about. But it's this addicting nature plus this poor reference point. So it's a bad reference point. So you're comparing yourselves to other people's highlight reel that's causing your internal happiness to go down. That ends up leading to, probably is the reason why millennials and the Generation Z are, so unhappy, that have higher rates of depression and higher rates of mental illness. I would say social media, specifically Instagram and Snapchat, are probably pretty good causes. But that is why social media, and specifically Instagram and Snapchat, are so bad. And the reason why I don't include Twitter in that, because I use Twitter, right? So why isn't Twitter involved? And the reason is because you can curate your content on Twitter. And Twitter can be just as bad for your mental health. But there is a way that you can use Twitter where you're just following educational people and things that are actually going to give you something good. If you do that with Twitter, and you do it very carefully, and you stay away from the negative aspects of Twitter, and you stay away from, I find political people, political pundits especially, are some of the worst follows, because they're always so negative. They always have something bad to say. And even if it's true, even if it's interesting, even if it's newsworthy, all that negativity eventually starts to bring you down. I don't even like listening to sad music, to be honest with you, just because the negativity negatively impacts your mood. And music can actually literally rewire your brain. And we'll talk about that at some point. But definitely be aware and conscious of the type of content that you're exposing yourself to, because it definitely has an impact on your brain and especially the development of your brain. So I had a few questions for you guys, but that's why I prefer Twitter over all the social media platforms, just because you can curate it and it can be educational. The only reason why you would have Instagram or Snapchat is if you have a business and your brand kind of depends on it. So you're a content creator, or you're someone that relies on these visual images to get out there. If that's the case, good luck. But that's kind of what you need to do. If you're a restaurant, it's good to have an Instagram so you can post the dishes on there, because having pictures of your food on your menu is kind of tacky these days. So, having an Instagram sort of supplements that. So, that's kind of the only situation. But Twitter you can use in a personal development, in a professional sense. Twitter can kind of supplant your resume, or it can be a good add-on to your actual working resume, the one that you send out to people, because then people can go on your Twitter account and see your thoughts. But if you use Twitter, irresponsibly, and you can get into trouble. And we're seeing people get in trouble all the time for stuff that they tweeted, 5-6 years ago. But that is why Instagram and Snapchat are bad for our mental health and bad for society. It's because they're addicting and bad for our mental health. But I had some questions for you guys, especially the YouTube's people. And if you people watching on Periscope right now have some answers to these, and that would be great too. But I want to figure out how to overlay videos onto the video that I'm doing. I don't know if it's possible on Periscope, but especially when I'm doing political analysis, it would be fantastic if I was able to, say at the bottom of the screen, right around there, if I was able to show the video that I was talking about, and then I could stop it and pause it and keep playing it. I know on the Joe Rogan podcast, Jamie does something like that. And I'm not entirely sure how they do that, but I would like to figure that out. If I could watch something live with my viewers, that would be fantastic. So if someone knows how to do that, leave me a comment, and so I can figure out how. Sorry, I got a call there. But also, I wanted to know how to do, well, I'm wondering if I should go on to YouTube Live. I'm wondering if the YouTubers would appreciate me doing these on YouTube Live instead of Periscope, and then I could just post the videos from YouTube onto Periscope. I'm not sure if that would be, I don't know. Just trying to iterate and improve on these videos for you guys. So if you know the answers to those questions, let me know in the comments below. How do I do video overlays onto my live videos? And should I move over to YouTube Live or keep doing these on Periscope? I don't know. But I would like to get some more engagement with people while they're watching, because I think that could be really interesting once we start getting some good conversations going. So anyway, let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys all later.